It seemed like just another ceremony last October when the Pittsburgh Steelers celebrated the 25th anniversary of their first Super Bowl championship team. But for Joe Gilliam, it was an opportunity to paraphrase Mark Twain. Reports of his death were greatly exaggerated.
Guys were hugging me, talking how glad they were to see me, and I understand because but the last public thing they heard about me, I was homeless and down, and I guess when they saw me and saw that I was all right, you know, we did a lot of crying and hugging, and it was a great celebration.
Hey, Joe, man, all right, how you doing? Good to see you.
Gilliam's former teammates had reason to be concerned. For over 20 years, he has battled a drug addiction so powerful it landed him in jail, homeless, and even pushed him towards suicide. It was a tragic turn for the man who should have been the Jackie Robinson of pro football. A skinny kid with a golden arm, he grew up in a loving family and was the pride of Nashville, Tennessee.
Joey was a local hero. The late John Merritt, who coached him, said Joey was the most talented, was the best passer he ever saw.
Dwight Lewis and Joe Gilliam have been friends since their college days at Tennessee State. Lewis was the editor of the school newspaper, and as an All-America quarterback, Joe led TSU to consecutive small college national championships. The fans nicknamed him Jefferson Street Joe, after the main drag in Nashville's black community. Gilliam was drafted in the 11th round by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1972.
When he was drafted by the Steelers, everybody loved it and just hoped that he would get his chance.
Gilliam's chance would come at the expense of another Southern kid with a strong, erratic arm and a shaky hold on the starting job.
Starting quarterback then was?
Terry Bradshaw.
How did he receive you?
Well, I think it was a future shock for both of us. I had never seen a white guy, anybody, throw like Terry Bradshaw. And I'm sure that he had never seen a black guy that could throw and play like I could.
He was just really impressive. A lot of poise in the pocket, threw the football, read the coverages. I mean, he did it all.
By the start of the 1974 season, Gilliam had won all 6 preseason games and the starting quarterback job, prompting Terry Bradshaw to make a request of head coach Chuck Noll.
I went in there and asked him to trade me.
Terry Bradshaw went to Chuck Noll and asked to be traded.
That's right. Well, if you would have seen him play and been in the position I was, and then the community, the Pittsburgh community, the black community, I mean, they piled in there. And there was a lot of pressure on everybody. The NFL and the league, the coaching staffs, the fans, the media, I'm quite sure that this was not something they wanted to happen. That's just putting it bluntly.
I did not understand the ramifications of who I was and what I was doing and what I represented as being the first.
The ramifications of being the NFL's first starting African-American quarterback would soon be clear to the 23-year-old Gilliam. Hate mail began pouring in.
Give me an example of what the contents were.
Well, you know, we're going to cut your dick off, we're going to kill you and your nigger family, that kind of thing. I carried 5 or 6 guns all the time.
Nevertheless, Gilliam started strong in 1974. After 6 games, the Steelers were 4-1-1. But it was after his 3rd start against the Raiders that everything changed.
And those guys beat me up pretty bad. My shoulder, my ankle, my knee, my ribs, they beat me pretty bad. And that's when I really started my first experience with hard drugs.
How did the experience come about?
Well, there was a guy who had been around me. He wasn't a ball player. He said, look, he said, snort some of this. It's going to make you sick, but you're not going to feel no pain. He was right about that. But even then, even initially when he offered to me, I knew initially that wasn't a thing to do.
But why did you take it?
That's a fool. A fool does something that he knows this is wrong and he does it anyway. I was a fool.
Gilliam's use of heroin and cocaine was so overt that it didn't take long for his teammates to find out.
I saw Joe Gilliam use drugs on a Monday night game against the Rams. You had lockers or stalls at the LA Coliseum, and so I was next to him. I pulled up on the edge of the wall to peek over at Joe to see what he was doing, to see how I could scare him. When I looked over, he had a little plastic bag out, had a little bitty tiny spoon, and he was sticking his stuff up his nose, white powder.
All day, all night. If I wouldn't sleep, I was using drugs.
That was the beginning of the end for Joe Gilliam. Chuck Noll put Bradshaw back in as a starter, and Bradshaw went on to lead the team to its first of 4 championships. Gilliam hung on as a backup on 2 of those teams, but soon his $500 a day drug habit caught up with him.
Did you try to stop?
Not initially. As a matter of fact, I kind of used the fact that I was benched as an excuse. 2 years later, I was released by the Steelers, and Hank Strand picked me up for the Saints. But I was about gone then.
Gilliam was cut by the Saints and bounced around the semi-pro leagues trying to make a comeback. On and off drugs, in and out of rehab, he had 3 failed marriages. Gilliam tried his hand at coaching and even worked as a drug counselor.
It comes down to being on you.
Eventually, he gave in and became a full-time junkie, living on the streets.
Joe Gilliam, the Nashville hero, was homeless in his hometown. Jefferson Street Joe became a regular Joe, wandering down Jefferson Street.
When Joey fell, I think it surprised a lot of people, and it disappointed a lot of people.
It also tested a 30-year friendship. Gilliam's college friend, Dwight Lewis, had become a newspaper columnist in Nashville and had written sympathetic articles about Joe's plight through the years. But by 1995, he was so devastated by his friend's demise that he wrote one particularly scathing editorial.
It got so bad that I thought Joey was soon going to be dead if he kept abusing drugs like he was. And so I wrote a column telling people that we should still stop giving Joey money, that all Joey was doing, that mostly what Joey was doing was using the money to buy drugs, and that we were helping to kill him.
Then, in a Super Bowl pregame show 4 years ago, NBC broadcast a story about Gilliam's homelessness, drug addiction, and begging. He hit rock bottom on national TV.
It was a bad time because I was conscious and aware of what I was doing. And what I did was beg, panhandle. That was the lowest I'd gotten.
He tried once again to beat his addiction.
In the book, huh?
This time, without the aid of rehab, he quit cold turkey. He rekindled an old friendship with a Nashville schoolteacher named Barbara. 2 years ago, they married and made a loving home with her 2 sons. Joe Gilliam says he's been clean ever since.
God knows your mind. He knows your heart. He knows when you're sincere and when you're not. And all those other years, all those other times, even though I'd been clean a long time, in spells, 7 years, 2 years, I had never really meant it.
Why is this time any different than previous?
This is the first time I've done it for me. This is the first time that my love for my mother or my father or my children or my wife or my fans has not been the motivating factor. This is the first time this is for Joey. This is for me. And I'm as proud as I've ever been of that.
No one is happier for Joe Gilliam than his old crony, Terry Bradshaw, who still can't forget what could have been.
He easily could have been him instead of me. He absolutely had what it takes to have led the Steelers to the Super Bowl. He gave me my job back. I didn't earn it back. That's another thing. I didn't beat him out.
Did it hit you at all to consider what could have been?
I've got so many blessings. And I look at life in those terms rather than what could have been or should have been. There are going to be plenty of other people to do that for me.
Joe spends his days as the family's homemaker, cooking, cleaning, helping with homework, and his nights working on a book about his remarkable life. But most of all, he lives like every other recovering addict, day by day.
Do I have any plans, for any grandiose plans? No. We'll see. Whatever happens to me, positively, it'll just have to come to me because I'm not in pursuit of anything like that. I want to stay positive and stay sober. And whatever happens is going to